The war's entrance into Moscow in October 2025 wasn't marked by explosions or chaos but began with something profoundly unsettling: a cancelled flight notification lighting up a smartphone screen. In mere moments, the daily hum of life in this bustling city transformed into a paralyzing silence. As elevators froze in mid-rise luxury homes, electric stoves fell silent in suburban kitchens, and online grocery carts remained stubbornly empty. This wasn't a traditional military strike. It was a calculated and modern blockade that began to dismantle Moscow's very operating system. Instead of a bombing campaign, Ukraine waged a war of attrition, slowly choking the veins of logistics, energy, and communication. What was perceived as an impenetrable bastion of power, marketed as Putin's unassailable fortress, began to falter as darkness crept in, its streets empty, its residents isolated, and its infrastructure crumbling. Refineries erupted in flames, airports became ghost towns, and transformers exploded, sending shockwaves throughout Moscow's complex network. This wasn't merely a technical glitch, it was a societal upheaval that reverberated through the lives of millions, morphing fear into fury, while undermining the regime's fundamental promises of stability. The war, once a distant conflict, had breached the doors of people's homes, revealing the Kremlin's deepest fear: an insurrection from within, born not from foreign invaders, but from the dwindling patience of its own citizens. So, how did the pulse of a sprawling metropolis housing 12 million come to a screeching halt? Months of meticulous planning and a tripartite synchronized operation lay behind this state of paralysis, showcasing not brute strength but the strategic brilliance of Ukrainian intelligence. Beginning on October 1, a relentless barrage of drones and missiles initiated the destabilization. These attacks were designed not for singular dramatic impacts but to engage and exhaust the Russian air defense systems, diverting attention and exposing vulnerabilities. From diverse locations along Russia's western borders, drones struck at various altitudes and intervals, creating an operational nightmare for Russian radar. Amidst this airborne chaos, lethal impacts were occurring far from the capital. The threat compelled the Russian Aviation Authority to enact a large-scale shutdown of Moscow's airspace, effectively paralyzing the city. Flight tracking data illustrated a dramatic cessation of all landings and takeoffs, inching operations to a complete halt. As recordings leaked from air traffic control revealed growing panic, the chain reaction spiraled out, igniting chaos among citizens in Moscow and St. Petersburg, marking a critical crisis not just for the aviation sector but for their entire socio-economic fabric. As airports sealed off Russia's most vital commercial routes, it severed not just individual vacation plans but the very arteries of commerce. High-tech cargo and essential components for industries already buckling under Western sanctions were marooned, while life-saving drugs and medical supplies destined for various Russian cities came to an abrupt standstill. With grocery store shelves emptying fast, particularly those reliant on air transport for fresh produce, the once reliable image of abundance in Moscow shattered. An anxious atmosphere enveloped the city, gradually morphing into a palpable sense of scarcity and anxiety. Now, the most devastating blow struck as the power outages swept through Moscow. This breakdown stemmed not from internal failures but from vulnerabilities within the expansive national energy grid, deeply interconnected yet critically fragile. Attacks on key substations located hundreds of kilometers away unleashed chaos. As power outages disrupted daily routines, chaos reigned. Trapped in elevators, isolated in the dark, it soon became clear, life in Moscow had changed irrevocably. Basic tasks turned into formidable challenges. The routine buzz of city life froze, internet connections faltered, isolating those working from home. Cooking a meal became a stressful endeavor, as electric stoves remained lifeless. This malaise rippled through the population, deeply unsettling the stability that the Kremlin painstakingly constructed over the years. Public communications faded into 20th-century obscurity, mirroring the alarming disconnection felt by millions. The seemingly mundane glitches of air traffic and power outages unveiled stark realities. They reflected the grim face of modern warfare and assault on daily existence. The blows to oil refineries, the backbone of the Russian economy, symbolized a strategic shift not just in warfare but in psychological perceptions. The initial uncertainty morphed into raw anger as people began experiencing the personal consequences of a war previously perceived as distant: a cancelled flight, empty grocery shelves, and the oppressive quiet in their homes. The air thickened with discontent, stories of frustration, such as a retiree navigating dark stairs or a mother returning empty-handed from a gas station, ignited rallies against their chaotic circumstances. These expressions of civil disobedience were not the preamble to a grand revolt but rather a manifestation of deepening distrust towards a regime incapable of safeguarding basic needs and unsettling omen of governmental illegitimacy. As the Kremlin watched its carefully crafted image shatter, it became increasingly aware that the true threat lay not in external attacks but within the hearts and minds of its citizens, who now faced an undeniable reality: the war was here, alive amidst the ruins of their everyday lives. In a shocking twist of fate, the first week of October 2025 began with a silent onslaught against Moscow. Instead of encountering bomb blasts, residents awoke to a grim notification glaring on their smartphone screens: their flights had been cancelled. This was just the beginning. Luxury apartments found their elevators grounded, suburban homes transformed into cold, silent shells as electric ovens fell quiet, and online grocery carts hummed with emptiness. This was not a military invasion, it was a calculated, insidious blockade. With each severed artery of logistics and communication, the city once hailed as an impenetrable fortress was plunging into chaos. As refineries burned and airports fell silent, the modern metropolis found itself grappling with a deepening crisis. The flickering lights of daily life were snuffed out, revealing a terrifying truth: the enemy was not a bomb, but rather a meticulous plan to dismantle Moscow's very foundation through its infrastructure. In this carefully orchestrated assault, the pulse of a city of 12 million was brought to a standstill. Months of strategic planning had led to this moment, a triphase operation launching an attack not solely by brute force, but through cunning intelligence. From the first days of October, relentless waves of drone attacks sparked a sense of dread. The purpose? To exhaust the Russian air defense system, not with one sweeping strike but through an incessant barrage that left the operators grasping in desperation. Moscow's fate was sealed as the airspace above became a ghost town, a decision made inevitable by the drone chaos. Airports like Sheremetyevo and Domodedovo came to a halt. The rumble of engines was replaced by eerie silence. Panic spread like wildfire, igniting a sense of urgency among citizens. What was once a bustling hub became a stifled organism, choked off from the outside world. But it wasn't just travel plans that were disrupted. Essential air cargo, once the lifeline of Russian industry, found itself stranded across distant airports in Europe and Asia. The supply chains crumbled, instantly leading to a public health crisis. Life-saving medications intended for cancer treatment and vital medical equipment bound for hospitals were left in limbo. Supermarket shelves, once brimming with fresh produce and essentials, began to show alarming signs of scarcity. The familiar comfort of abundance transformed into a landscape of anxiety and desperation. Yet, the most devastating blow was yet to come. Moscow succumbed to baffling power outages. Electrical failures unraveled the city, revealing the fragility of Russia's vast energy grid. This was no random outage, it was the result of a calculated assault on critical networks in Belgorod, Bryansk, and Voronezh, striking fear in the heart of the capital. Reports indicated that coordinated attacks sent shockwaves throughout Moscow's infrastructure. Normally built to handle fluctuations, the energy grid crumbled. As darkness spread through the city, so did chaos. Thousands found themselves trapped in elevators, homes rendered lifeless without electricity. The hum of modern life dissipated, plunging residents into a reality reminiscent of a bygone era. A sense of foreboding washed over them as the mundane was stripped away, replaced by a raw, palpable fear. Was this truly the tipping point for a regime that had promised stability? As daily life descended into turmoil, could the Kremlin maintain its grip on power? The citizens of Moscow were not just faced with empty supermarket shelves, they were confronted with something far more sinister. Would they break their silence and express their outrage? As chaos unfurled within the heart of Moscow, a sense of calm shattered under the weight of an unprecedented crisis. One moment, the city was alive and bustling, the next, it fell into chaos as power outages crippled daily life. Thousands found themselves suspended in darkness, trapped for hours in elevators, desperately yearning for the mundane comfort of a hot meal. Many, glued to their screens, were met with the devastation of no internet connection, casting them into an abyss reminiscent of a bygone era. How could this happen in a modern city? These outages weren't mere inconveniences. They were signals of a deeper, strategic vulnerability, a consequence of poorly maintained infrastructure overwhelmed by a prolonged war effort. Within a matter of days, a carefully constructed facade of stability began to crumble. The once bustling streets grew eerily quiet as the fragile network of power and communication fell like dominoes. Moscow was forced to confront a bitter reality: war was no longer distant. It was entangled in their everyday existence. Meanwhile, an unseen crisis within Russia's energy grid orchestrated this malevolent symphony. Reports revealed simultaneous strikes on critical high-voltage transformer stations hundreds of kilometers away, an operation meticulously crafted to overload the system. The shockwaves rippled through Moscow's local networks, creating blackouts that turned vibrant lives into shrouded despair. This was a war waged not with bombs, but with precision and deception. Yet, the devastation extended beyond the flickering lights. The pulse of the city quickened. Not because of renewed life, but due to a deepening panic. Grocery store shelves began to empty, the illusion of abundance peeling away. The people felt the bite of desperation as basic necessities slipped from their grasp. Anxiety surged through the populace, demanding answers in an unforgiving void. But what if the very lifeblood of their society, the oil refineries, was also under siege? In a stunning development, Ukrainian forces unleashed a wave of assaults on these critical infrastructures. Each strike not only disrupted supply chains but shattered the psychological barrier dividing reality from propaganda. Residents could no longer escape the war that had suddenly breached their daily lives, transforming it from a distant tale to a brutal reality. Suddenly, the chaos was palpable, felt in every frustrated whisper of a retiree climbing countless flights of stairs, every mother finding barren shelves where baby food once sat, and every young worker facing the uncertainty of unemployment in a digital void. As unease grew into outrage, this moment highlighted a crucial turning point. Citizens began to voice their frustrations. Small acts of defiance emerged. Could this be a sign of dissent that the Kremlin feared most? Would a measured shift in perspective reveal the true face of discontent among the masses? Ukraine's bold strikes ventured far from the front lines, precise as confirmed by open-source intelligence, or OSINT experts, analyzing satellite images. The new wave of extended-range kamikaze drones zeroed in on the Kurishi refinery near St. Petersburg, a vital artery pumping fuel across Russia. But can you fathom how these attacks ignited a nationwide fuel famine, crippling Russia's prized high-grade gasoline and diesel output, slashing production abruptly, sparking a swift, sweeping distribution meltdown? The relentless barrage pummeled refineries relentlessly, from Orsk, stretched 1,400 kilometers distant, right up to the one in Tuapse, looming 2,100 kilometers from battle lines. These hubs churned a hefty share of Russia's premium fuels. Their wreckage caused a brutal plunge in yield, unleashing a full-scale supply havoc. It slammed the battlefront first, then ravaged industrial hubs, and crept inexorably toward Moscow itself. Yet the deepest cut was the mental scar, a psychological tremor that shattered an unseen wall in Russian psyches, the illusion that warfare raged only in remote Ukrainian towns. Until now, state TV spun it as distant spectacle, a staged drama unfolding elsewhere. A Moscow dweller tuned it out, basking in unchanged routines. But battleship now invaded personal realms, via aborted flights, stuck elevators humming faintly versus silence, barren store shelves echoing emptiness, homes shrouded in ink-black darkness. Flashback to that crisp Moscow morning, the scent of fresh bread wafting from a bakery downstairs. The cool metal railing under your palm as you buttons up your coat, the distant hum of traffic like a promise of normalcy, yet now, your apartment door locks with a decisive click, ignorance fading into dread. Hazy shock morphed into raw fury, as minutes bled into endless days. Picture the elderly veteran trudging 16 stories, his labored breaths echoing in narrow stairwells, sweat beading on his brow, calves burning with each step. Or the frantic mother scouting empty gas stations, 3 fruitless stops, clutching baby's formula jar now a mocking weight in her palms, her desperation clinging like stale exhaust fumes. And the ambitious worker banishing from screenless woes, fingers tapping futilely on dead devices, the sting of lost livelihood settling like a cold fog. This invasion felt intensely intimate, agonizingly intrusive, maddeningly unjust. It funneled pent-up rage and despair into defiant whispers. Small rallies jamming streets with roars, anti-regime scrolls smearing walls in hasty paint, online rants flooding platforms like unleashed torrents. No grand revolt yet brewing, but a peril sharper, citizens eroding trust in the state's shield and sustenance. This core fracture of legitimacy looms as any government's gravest fracture. Their ire honing at their rulers, the architects of this turmoil. How could the Kremlin shatter its facade, breaking bonds with its flock, leaving millions exposed to unseen horrors? And what lurking menace awakens when the governed turn against themselves? In the aftermath of a shocking disruption, the citizens of Moscow faced an overarching crisis of trust. The government's failure to shield them from chaos ignited a dangerous flame of discontent. No longer were they united against an external foe, their anger was directed inward, towards a regime that had failed to safeguard their everyday lives. This was a breeding ground for rebellion, as whispers of dissent fluttered through the city like leaves caught in a winter breeze. As October unfolded, an ominous chill lurked just beyond the horizon. Winter was approaching. The once mild temperatures bore a relentless question: what would January bring? Would the power outages persist as the harsh freeze settled in, plunging Moscow into peril? How could the government assure sufficient energy to warm the homes when the very infrastructure lay vulnerable, on the brink of collapse? Survival replaced comfort as the priority for many. With each day, the impending winter disaster loomed larger, amplifying existential fears and eroding any remaining faith in those in power. This systemic failure in Moscow ushered in an unprecedented chapter of warfare. Victory was no longer solely about capturing land, it was about dismantling the opponent's social and technological frameworks. Ukraine's strategy did not require artillery to crumple the heart of Moscow. A deft twist of energy, fuel, and logistical levers sufficed. The Kremlin wrestled not just with military threats from Ukraine, but also with the grim reality that shadows darkened its own streets. Long lines for basic fuel, fears of icy winters, and the despair threading through the populace compounded the threat. The war had seeped into the lives of ordinary citizens, exposing the regime's vulnerabilities like never before. Daily disappointments began to fracture the foundations of power, unearthing an unsettling truth: when the fight shifts home, the stakes reach unimaginable heights. As winter approached, the air crackled with tension, and a question reverberated through the concrete dwellings of Moscow: how long could this charade of stability last before it all fell apart? The foundations trembled as discontent transformed into something far more menacing: the pulse of rebellion. Now, as winter threatened to envelop the capital in its icy grip, the stage was set for an uncertain confrontation. Would the people rise against their own government, stirred not by calls to arms but by a collective yearning for basic dignity and survival? The answer was about to unfold, revealing the true extent of their discontent and the potential for change. As October 2025 dawned, the people of Moscow awoke not to the thunder of a missile but to an eerie silence. A simple notification flickered to life on smartphones across the city: your flight has been cancelled. It wasn't a military strike. It was something far more sinister, an operation designed to cripple the very heartbeat of one of the world's most formidable cities. In the days that followed, the city's elevators froze in high-rise buildings, ovens remained cold in suburban homes, and shopping apps displayed endless error messages. Ukraine had unleashed a modern siege, systematically dismantling the intricate systems that powered Moscow's daily life. The city, long heralded as Putin's stronghold, now stood on the precipice of chaos, isolated and vulnerable. Fuel supplies were igniting, airports fell silent, and explosions resonated through key power stations. This was no mere inconvenience, it was the unfolding of a deeper crisis, pitting the populace against the very regime that promised stability. Each failure echoed like a pin dropping in a crowded room, revealing just how fragile modern life had become. So how did such a sprawling metropolis, home to 12 million people, suddenly find itself paralyzed? Behind this stunning malfunction lay months of meticulous planning and a carefully orchestrated three-phase strategy. This triumph was not one of sheer military might but of stealth and cunning intelligence. Commencing on October 1, relentless waves of drones and missiles bombarded the Russian air defense, exhausting its capabilities while remaining unseen. Attacks launched from multiple fronts, the western and southwestern borders, designed to create sheer mayhem within the Russian military's radar system. Imagine the chaos it created, operators inundated with alerts, confusion filling the air as they scrambled to identify the source of the chaos unfolding before them. Meanwhile, the real devastation was occurring far from the radar's blind spots. The relentless drone activity spurred an agonizing decision from Russia's aviation authority, leading to the closure of Moscow's airspace. Data rushed in from tracking stations, revealing a sobering truth. Flights ceased at major airports, Sheremetyevo, Domodedovo, and others, paralyzing one of the world's critical transportation hubs. As transport routes vanished, panic gripped the citizens. With flights grounded, both personal plans and crucial commercial exchanges facing complete collapse, fear spread like wildfire. Airports were not merely gateways, they were essential lifelines for a nation reliant on external resources, with vital cargo stacked in limbo across Europe and Asia. The repercussions span more than just cancelled vacations, they struck at the very core of Russia's economic structure. Critical supplies, life-saving medications, emergency equipment found themselves stranded, unable to reach desperate hospitals and warehouses. Supermarket shelves that once brimmed with abundance began to go bare, leaving the populace grappling with the reality of scarcity. This disarray revealed the Kremlin's most pressing fear, not the external adversary Ukraine, but the rising discontent among its own people. As citizens faced daily challenges, from power outages to empty grocery aisles, a simmering anger began to boil over. Could the erosion of basic necessities fuel a fire for change? How would this wave of frustration translate into greater unrest? As the echoes of frustration resonated through the city, an inevitable reckoning loomed on the horizon. Imagine a city of 12 million people suddenly stopped, not by bombs, but by invisible swarms of tiny machines buzzing overhead, turning the skies into a chaotic battlefield. What happens when the very air above your head becomes a weapon designed not to destroy with fire, but to paralyze the lifeblood of a nation? Previous events revealed this was no reckless assault. Instead, it was a masterstroke of patience and precision, unfolding over months, ignited by a relentless wave of drones and missiles starting on October 1st. Now, let's dive deeper into how this operation shattered Moscow's heart. Ukraine's military intelligence, known as GUR, orchestrated a strategy unlike any before. Instead of a single, dramatic strike, they unleashed continuous, nerve-wracking attacks aimed at exhausting the Russian air defense. Operators faced confusion and fatigue, as drones swarmed from multiple directions, darting unpredictably. They appeared from western and southwestern borders at different altitudes and times, turning radar screens into scenes of turmoil. Moscow's skies descended into a state of constant alarm. But the true devastation was striking far away, hundreds to thousands of kilometers from the capital, a deadly shadow cast across the nation's critical infrastructure. The persistent drone menace forced Russia's civil aviation authorities to make a crushing decision: shut down Moscow's airspace. Imagine airports, Sheremetyevo, Domodedovo, Vnukovo, Zhukovsky, all falling silent. From October 1st through 7th, flights across 8 major hubs, including St. Petersburg, Kaluga, and Tver, were grounded. Flight radar data confirmed the near-total halt in takeoffs and landings. Behind the scenes, leaked air traffic control tapes captured pilots and controllers wrestling with panic and unpredictability. Fear buzzed through communication channels. The city's lifelines were snapping. This was no longer just a local disruption but a national catastrophe. Moscow is not only the administrative heart of Russia, it's the core of its logistics and transportation. When its air connections were severed, the entire system slowed and stuttered. Cancelled flights soon meant more than spoiled plans or stranded travelers. Critical commercial gateways had closed. Air cargo carrying vital technology components, spare parts, and specialized chemicals essential to Russia's already strained industrial landscape were stuck thousands of miles away in Europe and Asia. The fragile just-in-time supply chains, which keep cities and factories running, fractured instantly. So, how deeply could this aerial siege affect ordinary lives? When the flow of goods grinds to a halt, shelves empty, factories halt, and the invisible threads holding society together begin to unravel. And the question lingers: how long could Moscow's pulse survive this slow suffocation? The silence over the airports was just the beginning. Soon, the blackout would reach into homes, hospitals, and beyond. The war, once distant, was seeping into every corner of life. The true battle was just starting.